What's up, everybody? Welcome to Balls Deep with Devin and Jovan, where we plan to dive balls deep in all the hottest stories in sports. I'm Jovan, and I'm with my co-host Devin. We're just two friends who built a bond over sports back in middle school and wanted to put our passion into a podcast so that we can share our thoughts and analysis with the sports world. We intend to cover a plethora of sports such as soccer, baseball, professional and collegiate football and basketball, boxing, and UFC. We hope you all enjoy.
Are we ready? I guess not.
Now that we discussed the trades that happened during and before the draft, we'll jump right into the draft. We'll start off by talking about the biggest surprise of the draft, our biggest surprise. What do you think was the biggest surprise of the draft for you?
I have to honestly say the biggest surprise for me was the fact that the Packers traded up in the first round to draft Jordan Love at 26. It's not the fact that they drafted Jordan Love. Obviously, you want to draft the successor to your current quarterback. But it came as a surprise just because it was not so long ago, in August of 2018, Aaron Rodgers signed a monster 4-year extension when he already had 2 years left on his previous deal, so which now makes him under a contract until 2023. So with Rodgers' extension, like Love's value is essentially capped. Green Bay's window of taking advantage of a quarterback on his rookie deal is pretty much done.
Yeah.
Just because he's essentially going to be sitting behind and being groomed by Rodgers for most, if not all, his rookie contract, which sucks for the Packers, but they kind of did it to themselves in a way. But also, talking about the window, is like Aaron Rodgers is 36 years old. You just finished making it to the NFC Championship, and you not only not add a weapon to help him maximize his window during a draft that was known going in as one of the best receivers drafts of all time, arguably, in terms of the depth. So you not only not add one of those receivers or one of the top receivers to maximize Rodgers' window, but you draft his potential successor, but also missed opportunity on taking advantage of his rookie deal.
I feel like, in general, the Packers draft class threw everybody for a loop. Two of their most productive positions, and they drafted both of them first 2 rounds. I think a very big surprise to almost everybody. Like you said, it just didn't make sense, any type of sense in any way. I think they would have definitely benefited a lot better drafting a wide receiver for Rodgers, which is probably their biggest need. And if Rodgers could stay healthy, they can make that NFC Championship again, maybe even go even further. But they're going to need more weapons than just Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm not saying that they had to draft a receiver because, like I said, there was depth at the position, so they could have definitely got a solid one late. But they could have got an offensive tackle to replace Brian Bulaga, who went to the Chargers. Could have got a replacement at right tackle. Or they could have got a linebacker, because I know they lost 2 linebackers in free agency to help the defense. But they could have got something rather than trading up and giving up more assets to get Jordan Love to maximize Aaron Rodgers' window. Yeah, his production dropped, and that might have kind of triggered them in drafting Aaron Rodgers' successor, I should say. I just feel like they could have done something a lot better.
They could have definitely got more
to help
value.
Immediately.
For me, my biggest surprise of this draft was Jake Fromm falling so far. He fell 5th round, picked 167 to the Bills. First of all, surprise team. The Bills just drafted a quarterback. Not that they can't, but they just drafted a quarterback who did really well for them. The Bills were really good last year with Josh Allen. But also, just in general, Jake Fromm falling that low, for me, was kind of odd. Pro Football Focus had him ranked the 69th overall prospect. Nice. And he was drafted at 167, which is a steal. In my opinion, he's a great game manager, which for me kind of screams New England Patriots. So I was actually surprised that a team like them didn't grab him. He takes very good care of the ball. He's not the most talented QB, but he has a very high ceiling. And in a league where it seems nearly impossible to take care of the ball, he's very good at taking care of the ball. 2019, he threw 29% completion percentage, which was actually his worst season. That was with an average of 5.5 more attempts a game at 27.5. And he had a 24-5 touchdown interception ratio and a career high 2,860 yards passing with a QBR average of 157 in college. For me, that pick could have, like I said, a team like the Patriots, who obviously don't have an immediate answer for quarterback, even though they may try to trick you in thinking that they do. I think Jake Fromm could have made a really big difference. Because in my opinion, Tom Brady, a system quarterback who flourished in that system, Jake Fromm could have been just that. And the fact that the Bills got him in the 5th round is just a shock.
I mean, as a Georgia fan, I can agree with you in testament on how good of a quarterback he was in terms of a game manager. I'm not surprised that he fell that far. I was more surprised at the team he went to. It's just crazy that all AFC teams except for the Patriots drafted a quarterback, which is pretty odd. But Jake Fromm is definitely a great game manager. I emphasize great because he's super intelligent and he was able to execute what needed to be done at Georgia, barring that he wasn't the most talented or gifted quarterback. Our quarterback room, because he did beat out Jacob Eason, who was taken ahead of him. He was drafted to the Colts. He beat him out his freshman year and forced basically Eason to transfer to Washington. And he even beat out Justin Fields, who then went and transferred to Ohio State and blew up. And I was upset about that. But if he was able to do that, he could have definitely been able to translate to a team like the Patriots, which I could have definitely seen as a perfect fit for him in terms of maximizing his potential. But in terms of him falling, at the state of the quarterback, the position where all the teams are with their quarterbacks, I can see why he fell that late. But it was just more so of a surprise to what team he went to, especially after the combine that he had. The combine wasn't the greatest, and what hurt him too was not being able to have his own pro day and kind of redeeming himself. So now we're going to move on to who we thought was the biggest reach in the draft. And by reach, we just mean someone who is projected to go a lot later, but was picked a lot sooner than expected. So who do you have as your biggest reach?
I have A.J. Dillon of the Packers in round 2, pick 62 from Boston College. To me, this pick, kind of what I said earlier when we were speaking about Rodgers, it didn't make sense to me that their top 2 performing players last year were their first 2 picks. There's no immediate impact for players like that, in my opinion, when you have, Aaron Jones, who's doing so well at the running back position for you, and then you go and draft a running back who, not to mention, was ranked by Pro Football Focus at 200. He wasn't in the top 250 for prospects.
Okay.
And he was drafted at pick 62. He wasn't even top 110. He was outside the top 110 and the consensus board. So to me, just this pick didn't make any sense. And if they wanted to draft running back, it could have been addressed later. They could have gotten the same guy day 3.
Probably, yeah.
So for me, that was the biggest reach.
And again, this pick to me was mind-boggling in a way as well too. It's like you go with Jordan Love first round. Yeah, you didn't go receiver, but this is kind of your chance to still get a top receiver that fell to the 2nd round, and they decided to go running back. And the fact that they do have Aaron Jones, and not only Aaron Jones, they have Jamal Williams, kind of just makes this pick a little bit more questionable. Like, A.J. Dillon is a solid prospect. He was obviously projected to go later. In terms of a runner, he's a solid downhill runner. I'm not taking anything away from him. He can definitely run the ball, but he's limited in the pass game, and they already have 2 solid running backs in their backfield with Jones and Williams. Williams is more of their third down back who can catch, and Jones is more of a do-it-all, but was more of their runner in a way. So they already have the balance, so why draft another one? He's entering the league as basically their 3rd string and won't really make an immediate impact. The only thing I can see as a positive about this pick was that Aaron Jones is going into the final year of his deal, and they're probably not going to pay him. Probably not. Which is why they picked A.J. Dillon here. But similar to what you were saying is, I don't see why reaching especially with the value there. You could definitely have got a receiver 100%. Now and address the running back position later.
Yeah, and that's not me saying that Dillon can't turn out to be great. I mean, he could turn out to be a few years later when they say, "Oh, let's redraft this class." He could be the first pick off the board, but at this spot and the team it just didn't make sense to me.
I agree. For me, this is going to hurt you a little bit because you're an Ohio State guy. But Damon Arnett to the Raiders at 19, I just didn't see the value there. I mean, there was really no consensus as to who was the third best cornerback in this draft class after Okudah and Henderson. However, Arnett was widely regarded as a day 2 prospect. So I'm not saying that by any means that Arnett is a terrible player. Arnett was a solid cornerback in college, and I'm pretty sure you can testify to that. But just according to analysts, he just projects to be a number 2 corner in the league, which isn't really great value at the 19th pick. And also, I was just expecting other cornerbacks to come off the board before him, which was Jalen Johnson, Trevon Diggs, who fell to the second round, Jeff Gladney. I was expecting those 3 to come off the board before Arnett. But it doesn't surprise me that it was the Raiders who reached for him. Just in recent years, they've been reaching for a lot of players. Mm-hmm. Just in recent years, last year, they got Farrell at number 4 pick. Yeah. So it doesn't surprise me that they reached for talent, especially at the position of cornerback, because they've been struggling to draft corners. I know they got Garyon Connolly a few years back. And they kind of reached for him too. So I'm not surprised. They're not really doing well in terms of developing their corners. So I wish him the best, but I just think in terms of value, this wasn't a great pick.
I agree. Even being an Ohio State fan and seeing how good a corner Arnett is, it's definitely somebody that could have been drafted on day 2. And there were a lot of good corners left on the board at pick 19, like you said. So I'm inclined to agree, regardless of the love I have for Ohio State, it's definitely not a player that they should have grabbed at 19.
Yeah, you could definitely...
It's somebody that they could have gotten in later rounds.
Yeah, you can definitely question on whether they could have got him later. Come 19, could they have traded back and got assets in return and still got Arnett? One can question if that was possible, or if maybe... I know Arnett got taken and there was a cornerback not taken not too long after, but maybe they had someone else in mind. And the Falcons, they drafted Terrell 2 picks or 3 picks ahead of them. Maybe they had him in mind because their love for Clemson all of a sudden. They've been drafting a lot of Clemson players. When he got taken off the board, they kind of just reached for Arnett, just reached for a need. But you don't really know if he was a beneficiary to that system at Ohio State, just because they were one of the best defenses arguably in the country, and he wasn't their number 1. He had Okudah on the opposite side, and there was a lot of talent on that defense, especially with Chase Young. So was he a beneficiary to that defense? We don't know. We'll find out. Didn't see basically how he translates to the next level.
Now going from biggest reach, let's move on to biggest steal. Let's talk about who we thought was drafted at the best value, picked at a good spot where maybe they shouldn't have been there.
Okay. So for me, my biggest steal would be Xavier McKinney to the Giants at 36. I'm kind of being a little homer here, being a Giants fan and all, but at this value, it's hard to kind of just look over it. McKinney was the best and most versatile safety in this draft, and being that the Giants drafted offensive tackle first and getting a Swiss Army knife in McKinney, now they paired basically the best offensive tackle in the draft with the best safety in the draft. Gettleman was saying how he was eyeing McKinney as soon as he realized that he fell to the second round. And if McKinney wasn't on the board when the Giants were there, he already had a deal in place to trade back. And for those that wanted Isaiah Simmons in the first round, me being one of them, it's hard not to like this pick, being that he was just as versatile as Isaiah Simmons. Last season alone, he played 200 snaps in the box, slot, and deep. 2019, he recorded a 87.6 overall grade and an 88.1 grade in coverage. There have only been 5 safeties to play over 450 snaps in the box, slot, and free safety over the past 2 years. He was the only one to produce a grade of 70 plus at all 3, which is phenomenal. The crazy thing is, in the past 2 seasons, he produced a grade of 79 plus in all 3 positions, which is great for a Giants fan because our defense is atrocious and one of the worst in the leagues. So to get a Swiss Army knife like McKinney, who I comped to Tyrann Mathieu, who is a safety but can really do it all on defense. If we can get a player of that caliber to help us immediately, our defense should you'll definitely see a difference in our defense last year to this year. And it's just coincidentally that we got a safety from Alabama, and we just had Landon Collins, but Nick Saban, out of all the great safeties that come out of Alabama, he's definitely said that McKinney's one of his favorite and one of the smartest players that he's ever coached. So that's great to hear, especially as a Giants fan going in. It was just a great value to get someone of that nature at 36 in the second round.
I couldn't agree more. That's a good pick at biggest steal. The Giants got somebody that has what they've basically been preaching this whole offseason after they got Joe Judge, which is versatility. They want people that are able to move around the field. They want guys who aren't just sticking in one position. They want, guys like who are Swiss Army knife, guys who will be able to fill different needs if they need to. So I think that's a very big steal. It was a great pick. I loved it. One of my favorite picks of the draft. But to go on from there, my biggest steal, J.K. Dobbins to the Ravens out of Ohio State.
Homer.
I love that pick. I love that pick not only because he's out of Ohio State. Obviously, anybody coming out of Ohio State, I want them to do well. But some didn't really like this pick because it doesn't fill an immediate need with the high-powered offense they have, starting with Lamar Jackson. But I really like this pick. J.K. Dobbins was a 2,000-yard rusher at Ohio State, averaging 6.7 yards a carry with 21 rushing touchdowns. He was very much in the Heisman conversation last year up until the final three. Obviously, once that came out, it was just those three. But he couldn't really be in a better place. Like I said, with third-year QB Lamar Jackson coming off of MVP season, insane season. Obviously, he's their leading rusher right now, but with so much of attention being put on Hollywood Brown and Lamar Jackson and even Mark Ingram, there's no better place for him. I mean, he gets to sit behind Mark Ingram and just learn. Ingram is 30 right now with just 2 years left on his contract. J.K. Dobbins will be the runner of the future for the Ravens. And I think that's really good considering they have such young talent in Lamar Jackson, Hollywood Brown, and now J.K. Dobbins, who is a phenomenal running back. So they kind of have their stone pieces to build around now. And so when they have guys drop off here and there, it's a lot easier to maintain that structure and be able to compete for years rather than have that short window and then have to rebuild again.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with you on the pick. I think the Ravens had a phenomenal draft in itself, but the Dobbins pick specifically, I think he lands in a perfect situation. Dobbins is a great runner. He definitely can run the rock for sure. His passing game, he definitely is evolving in terms of the passing game and learning how to catch space. He's getting better progressively. So he's not all there yet, but who really is coming out of college is more so he's going to develop with the years.
You also have to consider the system he comes from.
Yeah, the system he comes from. But I love this pick just specifically because you're going to the team that led the league in rushing. And as a runner, that's great to hear. And you're going to a team that doesn't really need you right away. So he doesn't have the pressure on him because they have Mark Ingram. But I honestly think he'll be the starter for the Ravens by the end of this year. But having Mark Ingram there to mentor him and coach him through will do him justice, just similar to how Mark Ingram played a factor on Alvin Kamara when he came into the league. Just having that 1-2 punch would definitely be helpful with Lamar Jackson in the backfield. But Dobbins in itself, I just think it's a great situation for him and can't really go wrong on anything.
No, I agree. And like I said, the Ravens not being a team that really need a lot right now, that running back pick isn't bad for them. For another team, you might say, hey, like you needed a need here or there, but the Ravens not needing so much right now, that's a good piece looking big picture for them.
Yeah, definitely. And what I was going to say was that now they have an additional running back to take over that offense. When they had Mark Ingram last season, it was phenomenal, but when he got injured or dinged up, they didn't really have a running back to kind of carry that offense in a sense and help out Lamar Jackson in the run game. Whereas now you have a running back in J.K. Dobbins that can really run the rock and almost give a threat besides Lamar Jackson in the run game for opposing defenses to fear, which is another reason why I think this is a perfect fit. And the Ravens essentially got a great prospect at the value that they did. Now, going from biggest steal, talk about the biggest sleeper and who we thought will essentially pan out in the NFL. Like what mid to late round pick will essentially provide more value than where they were selected. So who do you have as your biggest sleeper?
This is going to be a weird one because he was such a high pick. I got A.J. Terrell to the Falcons, round 1, pick 16. So you hear that he's drafted in the first round at pick 16 and you wonder how he could be a sleeper. It's mostly because a lot of people considered this a reach. They thought that the Falcons could have gotten a lot better corner for what was up there. It was definitely a need. And I immediately thought the same. I pictured Terrell would probably be around the 5th best corner in the draft, and he was selected 3rd overall. But after like reevaluating, looking at things, watching his tape, I love the pick. Not only did it fill a huge need for the Falcons in corner, but he has crazy athleticism, and it helps him win physically with finesse. He has a great change of direction. He's going to need a little work on ball skills, but he has great mirroring. He has a very linky athletic profile, which is going to be really good for the scheme, the cover 3 heavy scheme in Atlanta. So like I said, after actually watching tape and looking at his profile and looking at where he's going, I think he's going to benefit the Falcons a lot more than just the talent he has at corner.
Okay, I can definitely see that. I mean, he's definitely a solid corner. I did see it more as a little bit of a reach, just because similar to you, I had him ranked as like the 5th or 6th best corner in the draft. He was more so projected as a late first, early second round pick, or mid to late second round pick. So it was kind of a surprise to me as to see why they drafted him where they did. There was so much talks leading up to the draft about them trading up for a potential Isaiah Simmons or C.J. Henderson, but how the draft panned out, there weren't really many trades there were no trades that went on in the top 10 picks, which kind of hurt them in a way of getting the guy that they wanted. But for me, he's a solid corner coming out. There wasn't really much talent that he was playing against within the ACC, especially this past year, where the ACC was flat out just terrible. He didn't really play talent into the college football playoffs, or true talent, I should say. But I think what they could have done, being that their guy wasn't on the board at 16, they could have definitely traded back with a team like the Eagles, who were looking to trade up for a receiver and try to maybe jump the Cowboys and get CeeDee Lamb. Or they could have traded back and still got the guy that they wanted. Maybe they feared that the Raiders and their love for Clemson players would have drafted him, and maybe that's kind of what pulled them to kind of reach in terms of a position of need. But I think the Falcons will benefit him more than him benefiting the Falcons in terms of immediately. I just think the team that he's going to is a good fit, because now in practice he's going to be going up against Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones, which ultimately will help him develop his game into the corner that they hope for him to be.
I kind of, with what you said about the Falcons benefiting him more, I feel it kind of goes hand in hand. I agree. Like the Falcons, the way they run their system is very physical. So he's going to really, really benefit from that. Being a very freakish athlete, a linky guy, like you said, he's going to be covering Julio and Ridley and just developing that skill. And once he develops that skill, he's already got that crazy freakish athleticism. The Falcons, their whole thing is getting to the ball. That's the way that's their style of playing defense, is getting the ball. Wherever that ball is, you're going to be. And honestly, that's half the battle of playing defense, is getting to that ball. Once he gets the skill to play corner and more man-to-man, I think he's going to be a really great corner, and no better place to be than, like you said, lining up against Julio every day.
Yeah, lining up against Julio, Ridley, and your coach is a defensive-minded coach in Dan Quinn. That's kind of why I said the Falcons will benefit him more. I mean, he's going to have his impact because they really have no one in their cornerback rooms, with Trufant leaving or them letting him go. So he does have a little bit of pressure on his hands, but iron sharpens iron, and being that he has to go up against Ridley and Julio every day will ultimately just help him evolve his game and to evolve his game to fit his athleticism, because he is a freakish athlete. He might not be where he needs to in terms of skill set, but he's bound to get there.
I agree, and I think that team will help him develop wonderfully.
For me, my biggest sleeper I have is Bryan Edwards to the Raiders at 81. Bryan Edwards is a receiver out of South Carolina. Mm-hmm. He's a big-bodied receiver. He's more of a red zone threat. He's at 6'3". They already addressed receiver with the 11th pick when they drafted Henry Ruggs, which came as a little bit of a surprise on why Ruggs was off the board first before Judy and CeeDee Lamb.
A lot of people had that as their biggest reach.
But I kind of figured that was going to happen, similar to how it went out with John Ross. Everyone loves speed in this copycat league. You see Tyreek Hill. A lot of people comp Ruggs to Tyreek Hill. So the fact that they took him first was a surprise, because I don't really see him as the number one receiver. But the fact that they got Bryan Edwards where they did to complement their skill sets is, I see the value being crazy, just because Edwards has the speed and acceleration capable of eluding press coverage and challenging over the top. I witnessed it firsthand when he went up against Georgia. it was a terrible game by Georgia. We ended up losing by 3 in like double overtime, but he was a big reason why we were struggling defensively. He had 6 receptions for 78 yards and a touchdown in that game, and that wasn't even his best game. A lot of analysts said that he was lacking drive, or he was lacking effort that game, which is crazy just because he hurt us so bad. So just to see him go get added to an offense that already has Henry Ruggs, Josh Jacobs, they already have Tyrell Williams, but then you also have John Gruden as your head coach. And John Gruden, with his scheme, he's very creative. So the fact that you have Brian Edwards and Henry Ruggs to complement what they already have is crazy. I honestly just think that I'm predicting here right now, Brian Edwards will have a better rookie season than Henry Ruggs, barring injury, obviously. I just feel like barring injury, and if he can keep a consistent effort and stay healthy, he definitely will benefit from being in the situation that he is.
I feel like in a sense, I think it's a great pick, but also in a sense, I feel Edwards is benefiting the same way from the Raiders that you say that you think Terrell is benefiting from the Falcons. So it's kind of like the same thing. That's kind of how I feel about Brian Edwards. Is I feel he will do well, and I don't think it's that crazy to think that he could have a better rookie season than Henry Ruggs when you have so much around you. It's kind of like almost what we saw with Juju Smith-Schuster and how he was doing so well. And then once all the pieces fell, he was the only one left. And, I mean, it's only been of one total season, so we don't know yet still.
Yeah.
But obviously from what we've seen, it wasn't good. So that's kind of the same thing I get from that guy. I mean, his production will probably be there, but how much of it will actually be because of him and not the system?
Okay. I can definitely see that. I just feel like he's going to be overshadowed a lot because of all the big names going into the season. The Raiders just had a very odd draft to start. I mean, they made up for it on day 3, but on day 2, getting Edwards where they did, I just feel was super valuable in terms of complementing of what they already had on offense. And being that he's going to be overshadowed by those big names, no one's really going to be looking at him until he makes the production that I'm predicting him to have. And he has talent. He just needs to provide a consistent effort and stay healthy, because I know he has a bit of an injury history. So I just feel like the situation that he's in will only benefit him as a player. And hopefully Gruden's on his ass as much as he was Antonio Brown, because that's only going to benefit him as a player. So going from biggest sleeper, we're going to talk about our favorite pick of the draft. Who do you have as your favorite pick of the draft?
My favorite pick was actually your biggest steal. It's Xavier McKinney to the Giants. I mean, we touched up on everything he did. Like you said, 450 snaps in the box, slot, and free safety over the past 2 years, and only one with a grade above 70. Like I said, he could play practically anywhere on the defensive side of the field, not to mention what he could probably do on special teams. So, like you said, Swiss Army knife, that's my favorite pick of the entire draft. It just fits perfectly with everything the Giants have said this offseason, and plus the value of it. I mean, he was drafted at 36. He was considered a top 20 prospect. So everything overall, just the pick, what he can do, where he was drafted, and what he was actually rated. Tremendous value from this kid for me, for the Giants.
Yeah, I definitely say that, being that I had him as a biggest steal and you had him as your favorite pick, it kind of just validates how good of a pick or how good of a value that the Giants got on this pick. Judge went out and said that basically he sees him as the captain or the player that's going to run the defense, similar to how he did it in Alabama, additionally to the versatility that he provides with the defense. So I just feel like he's a future Pro Bowler, and a lot of analysts have had him predicted as a future Pro Bowler. He might even make the Pro Bowl his first year, just for the impact that he's going to make on the defense.
Yeah.
Because we have so many holes, so we're going to have him playing all over the defense, in terms of all over the field.
And not to mention his versatility and his ability to move to free safety now allows us to use Julian Love at his original position as slot corner rather than at free safety. So that gives the Giants a lot more flexibility in general, not just because of what he provides, but who he allows to provide in another area.
Yeah, and also the Giants really needed a safety that can play deep. We haven't really had one in a while. Even when we had Landon Collins, he was more of a box safety. Didn't really have the coverage skills that necessary. I mean, he did play free safety when we needed him to, but he wasn't always the greatest. But in terms of coverage, but the opportunities that he allows, like you said, in terms of versatility, will benefit us long term. Just having that deep safety that's really good in coverage. He's essentially a ball hawk and is able to track the ball, but he's also a coach in the back end or the secondary that's going to help development of one DeAndre Baker. I know with DeAndre Baker, he had his bumps in the road his rookie year, but he did benefit towards the end of the season. And a lot of people project him, like myself, to make a big leap in his second year. And a lot of it could be because of Xavier McKinney being back there and helping him put him in the right position.
Yeah, that was a great pick.
For my favorite pick, I have Patrick Queen to the Ravens at 28. Like I mentioned before, the Ravens just had a phenomenal draft. You can't really deny it. Patrick Queen was one of my favorite prospects in this draft. Selfishly, I was hoping that he fell to the Giants at 36 just because he's an excellent cover linebacker. To me, he resembles Devin Jovan with his build and electrifying open field speed and his play recognition skills. I didn't really watch much LSU games besides the ones that were televised, especially the SEC championship when they played Georgia. Just specifically that game, I just seen one guy flying all over the field, and I'm like, who's this guy? And coincidentally, it was Patrick Queen. I just feel like it's the perfect fit. The Ravens were able to find someone to fill a major hole and vacancy on their second level of their defense that CJ Mosley left when he left to the Jets in free agency last season. They already solidified their secondary with the trade for Marcus Peters last season, and they were able to provide help on their defensive line in terms of their run support with the addition of Calais Campbell because they were hurt by that in the playoffs when they played the Titans and Derrick Henry running all over them. So with that addition, the only thing missing was an addition to the linebacker core. The addition of Patrick Queen would definitely help that adding speed and coverage ability on the linebacker level.
Yeah, I agree. It was a very good pick. Like I said, there wasn't a team that had. If there was a team that didn't have many holes, it's definitely the Ravens. But they filled one of them with that pick. He definitely is very similar to a Deion Jones type player. He's also very physical, very athletic, and he's a very Falcon-like player. He's very good at getting to the ball and just using his speed in just the best ways possible. And taking just once he gets that elite, tracking of the ball and taking a better route to the ball, he's gonna be really solid for that team for a while, and they're gonna compete for a while.
I just know he played a major part in their national championship run, especially with helping their defense. Because I know Grant Delpit, being that he was one of the best safeties in this draft, he struggled with tackling this past season due to injury. So Patrick Queen and it being able to have his play recognition skills being able to be instant almost allowed them the flexibility because he was able to cover tight ends, cover running backs out of the backfield, even put a spy on mobile quarterbacks. So when they did play Alabama, he was able to shadow Tua. A lot of that helped them and benefit them. And I think if you pay attention to the national championship when they played Clemson, Lawrence wasn't really able to utilize his legs as much because Patrick Queen was there to prevent that from happening.
That was a very solid pick. From there, we'll go to the winner of the draft. And this is who we think had the best overall draft, or even just your favorite draft. Either or, honestly. Who's your winner of the draft?
I mean, I think we both can agree that the Ravens had the best draft. If we're going to pick a team outside of the Ravens, I was kind of leaning, or I was tempted to go with the Broncos just because of their addition or the weapons that they were able to add for Drew Lock and then the steal that they got in Cushenberry from LSU to help protect him. But that wasn't my pick. So for me, in the words of a great R&B artist, it's going to burn for me to say this, but it's coming from my heart. My pick is the Dallas Cowboys. Just they were able to get so many steals throughout the draft, which is crazy. Getting CeeDee Lamb at 17 is an absolute heist. That was a steal that they truly couldn't pass up. I was totally expecting them to go defense first round, as many players that they lost, especially with Byron Jones. But the talent like CeeDee Lamb landing right in front of you, you can't pass that up. And the fact that they were able to stick to their board and take a talent of that nature. Yeah, they needed a receiver, but it wasn't a dire need like the secondary was. But you can never have too many weapons on offense. So just being able to adjust their offense and adding arguably the best receiver and center in this draft in the first and fourth rounds is definitely going to help them in the long run. And addressing their primary needs on defense of the side of the ball, which was secondary and defensive line. So they got Trevon Diggs in the second round, which I thought was another steal. He fits their scheme perfectly. So they have a press-heavy scheme, and many projected Diggs to go in the first round, and that probably would have happened if it wasn't for Dallas passing on him in the first round. But it's kind of explanatory, being that they got Lamb in the first round. But they also got Gallimore, the defensive tackle from Oklahoma. His frame is very small, but he's athletically gifted. He just inconsistently was able to push the pocket. But I just feel like he's going to be able to impact immediately, being that they already fulfilled the need of defensive tackle with their additions of Gerald McCoy and Dontari Poe. So he'll just immediately jump into a rotation with those guys and be able to mold his game and be mentored by them, which probably long-term will help him consistently be able to push the pocket due to his athleticism. And they also got Anai, which is a edge rusher from Utah. A lot of people had him as a top 100 talent in the draft, who fell to them at the end of the fifth round. Although he doesn't have great athleticism for the position, he has the strength, motor, and skill set that should have had him picked a lot sooner. So I just feel like Dallas being able to address primary needs on offense and defense and getting essentially steals, players that were projected to go a lot higher than where they were selected, it's undeniable that they were one of the winners of this draft. And it hurts being a Giants fan and admitting that the Cowboys actually did something good. But, I mean, the Giants had a good draft too, but the Cowboys were just able to just sit where they were and allow the talent to fall to them.
Yes, it seemed to me that it was just as important the Cowboys got value, at least to them. They wanted value just as much as they wanted position of need. And it seemed like everywhere they were, they kind of got value and need at the same time almost. So it was a very good draft for them. But for me, I went with the Dolphins. The Dolphins did a lot of good things in this draft, especially considering where they're at now and their position in terms of their division. They got their QB of the future in Tua at pick 5 in round 1. A guy who could have obviously been number 1 overall pick, barring the hip injury he suffered his last year at Bama. But he's a great quarterback, very Russell Wilson-like. Put up 2,840 yards last year at Bama on a 71.4 completion percentage, a 33-3 touchdown interception ratio, and only 9 games in which he barely ever played the fourth quarter. They went on to spend 6 of their next 11 picks on O-line and D-line trying to build up the trenches. They received Breda during the draft via trade, who's going to complement Howard very well. And then they drafted quarterback Noah, Igbinoghene from Auburn, who's a very speedy, athletic corner from Auburn. He will likely be competing to take the nickel spot, but he's going to complement the tandem of Jones and Xavier Howard very well, especially considering those guys are very athletically gifted players as well. So long as he improves his play at the catch, is a very solid pick as well for the Dolphins. Overall, I think in the position they're in and what they got in this draft, it just skyrocketed their future. For me. I
mean, I love what the Dolphins are doing this offseason in general. Just adding players that are looking to play for Brian Flores or are similar to his system. I mean, they brought in so much talent within free agency in itself, but with the draft, they were very focused on getting their primary quarterback, protecting him for when he does play, and getting pass rush to get to the opposing quarterback. I mean, the one surprising pick for me was the cornerback from Auburn, just because they picked up Byron Jones in the offseason. Mm-hmm. However, Byron Jones, with his athleticism, he did play safety prior, so it gives them the versatility to move him all over, which will allow cornerback from Auburn to play outside once in a while. But I can definitely see him competing for that nickel spot. But that pick alone just solidified their secondary. And the fact that they got Tua. Everyone was talking about tanking for Tua. If you're the Dolphins, it's kind of hard to pass up on that much potential, regardless of the injury that he's recovering from. I mean, they did pass up on Drew Brees in the past and regretted it immensely. So they probably just didn't want to make the same mistake twice. Even though it was a high risk it's a high reward as well.
I agree.
And as a fan of the Dolphins, it's definitely going to sell tickets for when he does return because it allows them to be a lot more invested in the franchise than they were prior to Tua.
I agree. I think he's my favorite quarterback in this draft. I think he's the best quarterback in this draft. Obviously, he fell 2-5, and I think he's a steal at 5. The hip injury really just kind of scared a lot of teams away. Obviously not enough for him to still get drafted at 5, but like you said, tanking for Tua was just the only thing people talked about, and then now he's the 5th pick where he should have been the 1st. So I think, like I said, at 5, getting a quarterback like that was my favorite pick from them. But overall, everything they did in this draft was just phenomenal.
I just think that the hip injury actually benefited the Dolphins because, like you said, he would have definitely went first. Yeah. No one really knew about Burrow until this past season. So he was bound to be the first pick. Burrow's season was kind of just unquestionably the greatest from a quarterback. So that's why he went 1. But like the potential that Tua has, he hasn't even reached his potential. And look what he's done in college already. I mean, in half, he in the national championship, he stepped in for his first snap of the season, and he beat my Georgia Bulldogs. It was kind of heartbroken, but he's very humble. He's very calm, cool, and collected. Regardless of how big the game is and the potential that he has, it's only going to benefit the Dolphins moving forward.
I agree.
So just moving from winner of the draft, who do you have as, with the winners, you have to have a loser. So who's your loser of the draft?
I got my loser of the draft as the Houston Texans. Overall, they haven't been having the best last year in general. It seems like every move they make is almost like 2 steps backwards, and it's not even like they're taking a step forward. But yeah, Houston had no first rounder due to acquiring Laramie Tunsil via trade from Miami prior to last season, which is a great move for them. But then you bring up the fact that he is now the highest paid O-lineman by $4 million. And they actually did that deal during the draft. Tunsil posted a 75.8 overall grade, which is 17th among just tackles. So for me, just making him the highest paid lineman, I know now linemen have a high price tag, but it begs the question that maybe they could have gotten another tackle at the same value for a lot less money than that. They definitely addressed the need in this draft. With their first pick in round 2, pick 40, with Ross Blacklock, who's an interior D lineman. But I feel at that pick, at 40, they could have gotten a lot better value at corner rather than getting Blacklock. At pick 40, there was still Jalen Johnson was still there from Utah. Trevon Diggs from Bama was still there. Christian Fulton from LSU was still on the board. So like I said, as much as I see potential with Ross Blacklock, I just think at 40, they could have gotten a lot better value at the corner position. I don't want to make it seem like just trashing Houston. They grabbed a lot of players with very good athletic talent, but none of the guys seem to have talent that's going to make an immediate impact. I don't really see that in a lot of their draft picks. Maybe Isaiah Coulter. He's a wide receiver, which they're lacking right now. But he's got great athletic ability and straight line speed, but he doesn't have really the technical ability that a wide receiver should have. The speed helps. The athleticism helps. He could get better route running. But as of right now, there's no immediate impact other than just stretching the field. They have a good offensive tackle in Charlie Heck, good footwork, athleticism, a large frame. I think that might have been their best pick. Or John Reed, cornerback from Penn State, who's versatile, fast, strong. He was a little bit of a steal. But other than those 2 guys, like I said, there's no immediate impact from any of their draft picks for me. And I think when you got a team like the Houston Texans who was just knocking on the door of a deep playoff run just a few years ago, now seems like they're in full rebuild mode. It just throws me off a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely can see where you're coming from. I mean, with the Laramie Tunsil trade, it's kind of hard to project that when they made the deal. I mean, I feel like they did pay a lot for him, but it was much needed, being that they needed to protect Deshaun Watson at all costs and immediately. And when you have the chance to get a Laramie Tunsil, you go ahead and get him at all costs, especially with as dire of a need as it was. I mean, for the amount that they're paying, hopefully it pans out for them. I actually like the Ross Blacklock selection, in the second round at pick 40. He was projected to go late first on many mock drafts. He also, I feel like, will have the most immediate impact right away because they did lose Reader, which was their starting defensive tackle. He signed with the Bengals this offseason. So I think he'll be able to take his slot on their defense right away. But I do see what you're saying in regards to getting the value at corner. Their secondary has been atrocious for a lot of years. They could have definitely got the value there that they've been needing. But I do like the Ross Blacklock trade. And I don't really know much about their draft class besides Isaiah Coulter and Blacklock, because I do like the Isaiah Coulter pickup. I think he was very underrated and might have been a sleeper almost. My thing is, a lot of the receivers now, including Coulter, have very similar play styles. So one of them is going to have to go. And I'm looking at probably a Kenny Stills or a Kiki Kuti, just because they're all fast, can take the top off of the defense, but they're more, in terms of size, almost like slot receivers. And Isaiah Coulter, I believe, is a slot receiver, which can benefit their offense just because it won't be as predictable because you don't have a number one, but they just have too many similar play styles. They don't really have anyone to complement one another, which can hurt them in a way, in which I can see why you have them as the loser of the draft, especially being that they lost. They could have got a first-round pick for DeAndre Hopkins, and that number 40 pick was the pick that they got from Arizona for DeAndre Hopkins. So hopefully Blacklock's going to get a lot of that pressure because he was that pick, but hopefully he can overcome it.
Definitely.
For my loser of the draft, it has to be the Packers. All their moves seem to be way too questionable, and all I can say is poor Aaron Rodgers, man. I feel so bad for him. The Packers haven't drafted an offensive skill position in the first round since Aaron Rodgers. So you have one of the greatest quarterbacks in terms of talent that we've ever seen. He's one of the greatest quarterbacks in the league at this moment, and you don't get him the weapons that he needs to maximize the championship window that you have. I mean, like I said before, I don't disagree with them grabbing their successor, but the fact that they just signed him to a massive extension and you just made it to the NFC Championship, what do you want to win now? It's kind of contradicting itself in a way. So they could have used an additional offensive weapon to complement Devontae Adams, who's a great receiver, and their pair of running backs in Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams. Packers not only passed on him in the first round, but they passed on him in the entire draft. They didn't draft one receiver. The only offensive skill positions that are players that they drafted were the first three picks. And that was their potential heir apparent to Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love, a running back that is limited in the passing game and will likely not make an immediate impact this season in A.J. Dillon, and a tight end that is more like a fullback because he's essentially an H-back, which just means he's a blocker. He doesn't really have much in terms of his receiving game. So I just feel like they could have done a lot more with the selections that they had to maximize their window or the championship window with Aaron Rodgers, and they just fumbled the ball. There was AFC scouts or AFC GMs or whatever that were questioning on their moves, saying that they don't even know what the fuck that they did this draft. I know I seen the stat earlier that you sent me that was saying that with Aaron Rodgers has been in the league for 15 years, and he's only thrown one touchdown to a first-round pick. And that was this past year to Mercedes Lewis, who is a tight end. That is mind-boggling, knowing that Aaron Rodgers has been almost screaming for help in terms of talent on that offense, and they haven't really helped him on offense.
Yeah, they had a really, really awful draft. We touched a little bit on it earlier when you did your reach. I don't know where to begin with the Packers. It doesn't seem like they got any better with this draft at all. Not immediately. And honestly, there's maybe one or two bright spots that give you something for the future, but it's just kind of odd everything they did. I mean, they're so close to competing, like you said, and yet they didn't draft for need at all.
Yeah, I feel like this draft, since it was so questionable, now that I think about it, they were drafting more with Jordan Love in mind at quarterback than Aaron Rodgers, just because it seemed like they were drafting for the future rather than to win now. And
which is odd considering they're not that far removed from an NFC Championship game.
Yeah, I agree. They fumbled the bag on this one. I'm sorry, folks. They fumbled the bag.
That was a terrible draft.
That's all we have for you today. We want to thank you for tuning in. We'd appreciate it if you could like, follow, and subscribe to us on all social media platforms. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. We will definitely be coming out with more content soon. Hopefully this quarantine can come to an end soon so we can have a bit more sports to talk about with you all. Thank you again, and see you next time. Oh, fuck.